something came out of Northwestern over the last few days that I don't think any of us could have expected, especially in the year 2023.
Disturbing new details tonight in the Northwestern football hazing scandal. The Daily Northwestern spoke with a former player who described a pattern of, quote, vile and inhumane behavior.
As we try and make sense of the news that's coming down in real time, your initial reaction to the swift dismissal of Pat Fitzgerald is what?
Shock.
One of the big issues that we've seen in college athletics and across the country is the hazing issues. Things that we believe here in Northwestern, number one, is there's a zero tolerance for hazing. There's no reason why to ever have it. I know there's a lot of initiations and traditions and things of that nature. You know, as society's evolved and as we've really thought deep about how we want to welcome our new family members in to our programs and into our organizations, hazing should have nothing to do with it. Instead, how about thinking about, in our context, what we do? Have a big brother program. Have an upperclassman or someone older within the team look after a younger player. Teach them the values. Teach them what it means to be a part of your culture.
College football coaches walk around like kings in these programs. They're really treated like royalty and make millions of dollars. They can leave whenever they want and get no backlash from the media. But then the transfer portal was a topic of conversation. Seems like every other time a coach opens their mouth. But college coaches have the ultimate freedom and the ultimate power. But here's a question for y'all. If you want to wear the crown, does that or does that not mean you're responsible for the kingdom? Now, it's unreasonable to think a coach would know every little thing that happens on a team. And yeah, I agree with that isolated statement. But you realize that years of mass sexualized hazing doesn't really fall into the little things category. So let's go back a little and let me tell you how this whole thing unraveled based on the information that we have at this moment. This video gets very uncomfortable. So fair warning, bro, like, This is a weird one. Probably the last time I was this uncomfortable doing the video was probably way back when I did that Kellen Winslow video. Back in the 90s, Pat Fitzgerald played linebacker for Northwestern. In 95, he helped lead them boys to a 10-1 record. That same year, the school got to their first bowl game appearance in 50 years. Not so fun fact, Pat broke his leg in the last regular season game and didn't even get to play in the bowl game. But during his time at the school, dude was a two-time Chuck Benderick winner, two-time Jack Lambert winner. They won 2 Big Ten titles during dude's playing days. And this is a school that's not super decorated when it comes to football. The point I'm trying to make is that at Northwestern, Pat Fitzgerald is the fucking man. So his power within that organization is very significant, which could explain how this stuff has been insulated for so long. After a very brief stint in the league, dude got into coaching. He did 1 year each in Maryland, Colorado, and Idaho. Then in 2001, he returned to Northwestern as an assistant. A few years later, he got a promotion, and from 2006 until just a few days ago, he was the head coach at Northwestern.
And Pat Fitzgerald's lengthy time in Evanston officially coming to an end, Marshall.
Yeah, as a head coach, dude's got a little better than a 500 record. Now, he did win Coach of the Year back in 2018, and he's got 2 Big Ten West Division championships. Now, I don't really follow Northwestern football at all, so while his record's not amazing, I'm assuming that they felt that he stabilized the program that has been historically bad. And I'm not even going to try to pretend that I can speak for the Northwestern fan base, but I have seen multiple people say he's one of the best coaches they've ever had. And when I watched all the analysts initially breaking this news, they all seemed so shocked, like they held this dude in really high regard. But it seems like he might have sold them all on a specific persona, a persona that didn't really seem to match up with the actual culture inside the program. Okay, so enter the quote-unquote whistleblower, the person who went to the university president and explained what was going on. Now, this person is anonymous, but they are a former player, somebody who played on this team for Pat Fitzgerald. So whether you decide to believe this guy is up to you, but he definitely would have had firsthand knowledge of the situation. Now, a current player on the team who also wanted to remain anonymous has come out and said the whistleblower is exaggerating. Well, first the team said there was absolutely no hazing, but then in the same article they said the guy was exaggerating. So it's like, okay, did nothing happen at all, or did he spice it up a little? People do sometimes come out and say this stuff to get attention, but I really don't think attention was the motive at all, because dude didn't go to the media until July 8th of this year. But he went to the school president about the situation last year in November. The fact that he waited 8 months pretty much kills the attention argument. Somebody looking for attention is not waiting 6 months to go to the media. They'll be trying to get them headlines pretty much immediately. They probably also would not choose to be anonymous, but if this account is to be believed, then anonymity might be over with. But there's another allegation that says he just wanted to get the coach fired. I got some thoughts on that as well, but we'll discuss those a bit later, because right now I want to go back to last November when he made the allegations. Alright man, let's take a real quick break to thank today's video sponsor, Magic Spoon. Bro, time is moving fast, but something that slows it down and almost even feels like it kind of reverses it is eating cereal with my little man on a Saturday morning. It just takes me back in time to a much simpler place. A time when I could digest anything. I could eat 5 bowls of cereal, not gain a pound, and feel great right afterwards. Magic Spoon helps me get closer to that without ingesting all the sugar and the empty calories. Plus I get a nice little start on my protein intake for the day, all while sharing some priceless moments with my son. You feel what I'm saying? Magic Spoon is high protein, is keto friendly with much lower carbs than your standard cereal. There's 0 sugar, is gluten free, and is grain free, as the taste comes from natural flavors. Speaking of flavors, the variety pack comes with 4 of them: peanut butter, fruity, frosted, and my favorite right now, cocoa. Click the link below to grab a variety pack and try it today, and be sure to use my promo code FlemLo at checkout for $5 off your Magic Spoon purchase, or just go to magicspoon.com/FlemLo. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, Magic Spoon will refund your money with no questions asked. So click the link below and use code FlemLo for $5 off any purchase at Magic Spoon, or go to magicspoon.com/FlemLo to save $5 off your purchase today. Man, shout out to Magic Spoon once again for sponsoring the video. Without further ado, it's time to jump back in. Right now I want to go back to last November when he made the allegations. So in November of 2022, dude made the university aware of the allegations. The school says they took the allegations seriously and they did launch an investigation. They hired an independent attorney who came in and interviewed players and coaches. And the crazy thing is that they actually found evidence to support these allegations. But it all culminated in Pat Fitzgerald just being suspended for a couple of weeks. Then it was a couple of weeks in the middle of the summer, an extremely light punishment, and the reasoning that they gave was that even though they did find some evidence that the hazing allegations did indeed seem to be true, they could not prove that Pat Fitzgerald actually had knowledge of the hazing. So again, it's the king and kingdom argument. Is the king responsible for what happens in the kingdom? A lot of coaches get hired and make millions of dollars because of their track records of building great cultures. So if you get credit for building a great culture and you at a school for 15 years and the culture is terrible, I don't understand how when it's good, oh yeah, that's all me, and then when it's bad, it's like, oh, that ain't my fault. When the suspension went public and the university was faced with this exact logic, they was really kind of stuck. They said 2-week suspension and no more off-campus practices. That ought to show us.
Been let off with a slap on the wrist.
Now, if you go to Google and type in top journalism schools in the world without scrolling down one time, you'll see New York University, University of California, Berkeley, and the next school you'll see is Northwestern University. They tried to insulate this incident with a 2-week suspension at one of the top journalism schools in the country. How'd that work out? Well, just when they thought they'd swept it under the rug, new details from the story broke in the school newspaper. The former player went to writers at the Daily Northwestern and they published this article on July 8th. They thought the July 7th story would put a nice bow on this, but then the very next day, it just went nuclear. Now this article once again has some really disturbing quotes. I just want to warn you again because I hate when I get blindsided by this stuff. There's weird sexualized hazing, you got your racism allegation, and what seems like an overall terrible and toxic environment. And I don't mean toxic like the little social media buzzword that people have just substituted with bad. I don't mean that. I mean actually toxic, like a poisonous environment, slowly killing anything exposed to it for too long. And if these allegations are to be believed, it's the worst kind of toxic because it's disguised as super righteous, and all the people that's within it have convinced themselves that they're the good guys and the victims in the situation. It's like in medieval times when they was burning your eccentric aunt because they thought she was a witch. Now this is a journalism school, so they didn't stop at one source. They got quotes and corroborations from 3 separate former players. So to start, the former player that we've already spoken about said that some of the team's hazing involved coerced sexual sexual acts. That's the word they used in the article, so I wanted to use their word, but coerced, if you don't really use that, it really just means forced. And he even says that he thinks Coach Pat Fitzgerald knew about it. Now, I played every sport in high school and I played football in college. When your coach say the team is about to get ran, that generally means gassers or maybe 110s. But according to this former player at Northwestern University, the word running for them took on a whole different meaning. According to these reports, running at Northwestern is when a player, usually a freshman, was restrained or held down by 8 to 10 upperclassmen dressed in purge-like masks. Okay, they would hold the player down, and all the weirdos who participated, not the person getting held down, but the weirdos who was holding him down, they would then dry hump the player, again usually a freshman, inside of a dark locker room. Now, I don't know, like, how am I supposed to process this information? Is this the shit that y'all was doing, saying that dude was exaggerating or trying to twist it? Bro, it's already twisted. If even half of this is true, you doing way too much. So this weird crap was supposedly done to punish members of the team, again usually freshmen, for making mistakes in practice or making mistakes in the game. If you run the wrong route, you're about to get held down and dry humped. Allegedly, they had a special signal. They called it the Shrek Clap, and they used it when they were about to engage in this really weird and very stupid cult-like ritual. And according to the former player, Coach Pat Fitzgerald, who would never speak on the hazing, seemed to be in on it. Now, he wouldn't be inside the locker room when this hazing took place, but when a freshman messed up in practice, according to the former player, Coach Fitzgerald would literally, right then and there, with a mischievous look on his face, he would do the Shrek Clap. The former player interpreted that as dude marking the freshman. He'd do the clap and then the rest of the team would slowly join in. If he does the clap after you mess up, your name goes on the whiteboard, and at that very moment, you had been marked to get ran. Now, I'm gonna be honest, man, I do tend to believe these allegations, but still have to consider the fact that maybe, just maybe, this little signal, which was described as just like an over-the-head clap, could have been something that Coach Fitzgerald just kind of always did, and then some crazy dudes on the team took it and made it into another thing. That still is a possibility that you just have to consider. Now, according to the article, man, the school newspaper, again, going back to these journalists, bro, they supposedly obtained pictures of the whiteboard that they say was just sitting in the middle of the locker room for everybody to see. They say the board had two labels. One said runs giving, and the other said the Shrek's list with a list of names under each. That said, I haven't seen anywhere where the picture was published. You think they just blur out the names and drop the pictures for further evidence. So if you wanted to build a case for Coach Pat Fitzgerald, that's one of the small things you can try to cling your argument to, but if you're doing that, bro, I wouldn't go too crazy because that picture could leak at literally any moment at this point. Now, I've seen some people say they think the whiteboard details make it seem fake. If this list was sitting in the middle of the locker room, then everybody would see it, because there are other people than just the members of the team who are allowed to go in the locker room at different points in time. But if these allegations are to be believed, bro, they're running this thing like a cult or like a secret society. So these names on this list wouldn't mean anything to a person. You don't know what the hell Shrek's list is or runs given is. Like, runs given literally sounds like running on the field. If you gave me 20 guesses at what the Shrek's list was before I read this story, I don't think in any of my 20 guesses I would have actually gotten this right. Like, I would have never guessed this weirdness. Like, I just would not have guessed it. It's a shocking experience as a freshman to see your fellow freshman teammates get ran. But then you see everybody bystanding in the locker room. It's just a really abrasive and barbaric culture that is permeated throughout that program for years now. It's done under this smoke and mirror of, oh, this is team bonding, but no. This is sexual abuse. Now, former player number 2 who spoke to the Daily has corroborated pretty much everything the first guy said. And the players ain't the only ones who've confirmed that at least some of this stuff was actually happening in that locker room. The private investigator that the university hired revealed that while current and former players, quote, varied on their perspective regarding said conduct, the whistleblower's claims were largely supported by evidence. The whole varied on their perspective caveat is really crazy, because if you was getting held down versus holding somebody down, then of course your perspective is very different, bruh. Literally. Believe it or not, this somehow gets worse. And this next part adds a variable into that last part that potentially makes it even worse than I thought. Try to stick with me a few more minutes and you'll understand what I'm trying to say. Now, the former player also said the team had a once per year tradition. This tradition was again confirmed by the two other players. The tradition is called the car wash. Now, again, I played sports and I remember, bro, one summer, man, my basketball team needed new uniforms. So we set up next to the ATM machine and charged people to wash their cars so we can get our little uniforms or shoes or whatever it was. But Northwestern has once again taken an honest team activity that promotes going out and working for the things you actually need, and they've tainted it in a way that's both weird and disgusting. And the more of this stuff I read, like, I start to really question their motives. So every year, some players, one article specifically said linemen, would line up naked at the entrance of the shower. So again, with no clothes on, they would essentially block the entrance and spin around in a circle like an automatic car wash. Now, if you wanted to take a shower that day, you had to squeeze through them. This is obviously ridiculous, but the question becomes, what the f is y'all trying to accomplish? Nah, for real though, like, what's the point? Why are you doing this? Really ask yourself. So if you're me, you're probably gonna just go back and shower in the dorm room. But if you did go in there, bro, your nightmare was not over. Allegedly, and if this is true, I'm comfortable saying these damn idiots hooked the high pressure hose to the shower and sprayed people. Now, this might not sound that crazy, but this act is very painful. So as you can see, this stuff is basically just some weird power trip by the upperclassmen who were maybe violated, now trying to violate the freshmen. It's kind of like when a person is abused as a kid and then they grow up and become an abuser themselves. If that seemed like a stretch, bro, it's not that damn different. You just maybe haven't thought about it within this context. There's no team building going on, bro. You're trying to break people down. You're trying to demean them and abuse your power that's been collected in this toxic environment. There's other weirdness like freshman quarterbacks being forced to take under center snaps where both the quarterback and the center are naked. If this is even partially true, bro, I think it speaks volumes. 95% of y'all hazing involves a naked man. Now, remember we talked about the running thing earlier in the video. When I first came across that initial information, from the very jump, it sounded bad. But as I kept reading it, I found out they was into all this other weirdness, which all involved being naked. Then you think about the running. Are they even wearing clothes when the running takes place? You know what, bro, never mind. So earlier I talked about how a current member of the team who also wanted to be, kept anonymous, came out and said that all the former players' accusations had been exaggerated and twisted. The current player said that he spoke to the former player, and the former player said that he had, quote, a detailed plan with the sole objective to take down Coach Pat Fitzgerald. If you're a Coach Fitzgerald fan, bro, and you're jumping behind this, let's stop for a second to think about what the current player just said. When you say the former player exaggerated or twisted the rituals, the only thing that makes me think is that, okay, so it did happen. Like, some version of this stuff does happen in y'all's locker room. If that's the case, bro, I'm sorry, but there's nothing to twist. This type of hazing in any capacity, bro, that's the that's twisted, and it feels like they almost have been brainwashed into thinking this is okay. Now, like I said, the current player tried to discredit the former player by saying that he had a detailed plan to try to take down Pat Fitzgerald. For the sake of argument, bro, let's just say that's true. How does it contradict anything the former player said? At the beginning of the video, I laid out to you how much power Pat Fitzgerald has inside the organization, a power he started building way back in the 90s. Now, if this stuff about Northwestern is true, then the best move that can be made would be to remove Pat Fitzgerald. But as a former player, it ain't like you can snap your fingers and then poof, all of a sudden this fixture is just gone. You could be 100% in the right and still nobody would believe you, and even if they did, 2-week suspension would be the punishment. You can't just tweet something like this out with no thought and think mountains are gonna move. To scale a mountain of this magnitude, of course you need a plan. Now again, I'm not saying that the former player's telling the truth. I don't know what happened in that locker room. Thank God I wasn't in there. I'm just saying, if the best you can do to try to discredit the dude is say that he exaggerated and that he came up with a plan, that information in itself does nothing to sway the damn argument. Coming in, I had questions about the former player. player. And when I saw a current player came out and spoke up against dude, I was waiting on him to tell me about some history between the former player and coach Pat Fitzgerald. Was he kicked off the team or did he quit the damn team? Did he want playing time and Pat Fitzgerald didn't give it to him? Even that alone wouldn't just 100% sway me, because that stuff could be true and the locker room stuff could also be true. Both things could be true, but they didn't even give me that. Up to this point, I've seen pretty much no motive at all as to why this former player would just want to go after Fitzgerald, other than the fact that all this craziness was taking place. I'm not against all hazing. I think rookies should pay some dues, like carrying some shoulder pads or picking up the dinner tab. But all this weird dry humping and naked man punishments is really just a weird fetish disguised as team bonding. To be honest, it ain't that much team bonding in the damn world. Now, assuming this is all true, this is to the people behind the craziness, man. The people who came up with this. The dudes wearing the purge mask. The dudes just holding people down. The whole damn Shrek squad, bro. This is a message to y'all. You need to look in the mirror, bro, and really question your motive, because your primary goal with all this was not team building. And judging off y'all record, it ain't about winning football games neither. I didn't even get into none of the racist stuff. It's like it's almost becoming a footnote. So some players have also come out and accused the program of being racist, citing things like black players being forced to cut off their long dreads, but white players being able to wear their hair like however they want. And making it even more disgusting is like all of this stuff was done under the guise of the Wildcat way. A lot of these dudes have sit back and watch what Bill Belichick was able to do in his heyday. But when they get that ultimate power over the organization, they inject their social and religious beliefs in there as well. And once you put it in the bylaws and create a little mantra, it can never be revisited. Like, does this really make sense? Is this racist as how do our non-white players feel? These things are never discussed, and if you bring it up, you get ostracized. We've seen the anti-dreadlock thing as a not so sneaky form of racism for decades at this point, and I think a lot of people who live in these little insulated echo chambers, they all end up thinking the same way. Everybody's familiar with the term groupthink, but they don't realize when they're participating in it. So while a lot of the country, no pun intended, has grown the way they think about black hair in general, as dreads have become super common, there's still some areas in the country that turn their noses up at the hairstyle. But that's not the only accusation of racism that's involved in the situation. The third former player that the Daily interviewed is a former lineman on the team. He's a Latino guy named Ramon who played for the Wildcats in the late 2000s. Under Coach Pat Fitzgerald. Again, he's been there for a long time. Quote, "I didn't feel like I could be anything other than white," former player Ramon Diaz Jr. said. "We never felt like we could be ourselves. We had to fit in by being white or acting white or laughing at our own people," end quote. To belittle somebody's people in front of them and then pressure them to join in like, oh man, it's just jokes. Well, the jokes are fucking offensive, and they're usually rooted in stereotypes that completely limit what you are as a person down to one characteristic that may or may not apply. He said they tried to force him to clean up rooms that they trashed, saying they knew that his people were really good at cleaning up. He said both players and coaches used to make comments like this. They even shaved Cinco de Mayo in the side of the dude's head. They treated the man like crap solely because of his ethnicity, and he had no outlet because even the coaches was in on it. So this man went on to become a clinical psychologist, but he still has to routinely see a therapist himself. He was clinically diagnosed with PTSD after suffering flashbacks of his time at the school. Now, I don't know what's going on in Northwestern, because if you just glance at the news, you realize real fast that it's not just a football program. Northwestern's baseball coach is currently being accused of racism as well, amongst other things. That's like a whole nother can of worms. Then last year, the school also had an incident where they allegedly tried to cover up a sexual abuse scandal where a cheerleader was actually groped by a fan. If she was groped by a fan, I'm not sure why they would try to cover it up. Maybe that fan is a child of someone that's important. Maybe they didn't want the bad press, or maybe they just messed up in the head. I don't know, but it's a lot of stuff that's going on at that school. Almost everywhere you look right now at Northwestern University, there's evidence of a poisonous environment that needs to be cleaned up. Now, as far as Pat Fitzgerald, bro, it's honestly super simple. simple. And I think, at least I think, a lot of people will agree with me. A head coach is obviously responsible for his players. If hazing was going on for all these years, then one of two things are true. You either knew about it or you should have knew about it.
Look after a younger player. Teach them the values. Teach them what it means to be a part of your culture. And give them every opportunity that they have.
But the fact that it happened, whether it was on your watch or just under your nose, either way you should be fired. It's weird because college coaches get held to a pretty low standard despite the fact that they go sit in people's houses. They promise these kids' parents they're in great hands and talk all this crap about their culture, but then turn out freshmen in your program are being targeted specifically.
Have an upperclassman or someone older look after a younger player.
I said it earlier, building a culture is one of the main things coaches get credited with. So when the culture is as toxic as this, how is that not on the coach? Like, you can't preach culture in the Wildcat way and have an actual fucking prison culture inside your damn locker room. Now, when discussing this topic, I've heard multiple analysts talk about how shocked they were and how impressed they'd been when they interviewed dude and how he was so buttoned up in his demeanor and how he commanded a room and all of this stuff. So he's either out here bragging about how great his culture is, while freshmen are getting scarred for life every day on his team, or potentially worse, he's smiling in your face and telling people what they want to hear, then turning around and injecting cult/prison culture into the team. So now Pat Fitzgerald is suing Northwestern like he actually believes he shouldn't have been fired. It's funny to me because it's always about accountability until it's time for you to be held accountable. That's why I never put much stock in the crap these dudes be selling. Bro, I worked in sales for years, and the dude with the widest smile, the most over-the-top energy, that's usually the worst person that you can shop with. That dude gonna sell your grandma all kinds of crazy warranties and insurance that she absolutely doesn't need. Now, one thing that might help him is the fact that the university itself also seems to be full of crap. They did handle this horribly. They tried to sweep it under the rug, and when the facts dropped, they reversed course and tried to cover their asses. I didn't focus on this a ton because most of the mainstream coverage I've seen seemed to want to focus on that exclusively, which I think was to avoid talking about the situation directly. And after going through all of this crap, bro, I honestly don't even blame him. Either way, that's the Northwestern situation in a nutshell. I'll catch y'all in the next one, man. That's all I got for today.